Welcome back, Agile Mentors. We're here for another episode of the Agile Mentors Podcast. I'm with you here, as always, Brian Milner. And today I have back the one and only Cort Sharp with us. Welcome back, Cort.
Hey, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Cort and I were chatting just in between engagements and things we were talking about going on. Cort's coaching a lot recently, and I've been coaching a lot recently as well. And so we've been kind of sharing stories and talking about kind of some of the things we've been experiencing. And you came across something really interesting recently that I thought, we talked about might make a good topic. So help us out. What was that you came across?
Yeah, so I've seen this idea pop up a few times actually on LinkedIn specifically, but I've seen it trickle out into other areas within the coaching that I've been doing recently, but also just in other pieces or parts of the internet as well. And it's this idea of like with AI being brought into organizations, brought into companies, helping out developers so much that AI has actually lowered that barrier for the programming side of stuff, programming side of the development side of things, that the new blocker that is currently emerging, so the new piece that's been slowing everyone down now, is actually the product management side of stuff itself, which I thought was just so fascinating because I've done a little programming, definitely more in the product management side of things now, but I kept seeing this pop up and I was like, man, I would love to just hear, Brian's thoughts about this and the community as a whole, everyone's thoughts about this a little bit here too. But I have my own thoughts, but just quick little immediate reaction to that idea there, Brian. How does that make you feel? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I actually have been thinking this was coming for a while. I don't have this prepared, so please don't get me wrong in this. I know I always say data or didn't happen, but there are 3 studies that I found at one point that were trying to determine the number of features in just your average software project that were rarely or never used. And it was 3 separate studies spread out over years. And one of them was like 48%. That was the low one. It was like 48%. Then there was a middle one that was 64, and then there was another one that was more recent that said like 80%. And I mean, think about that. Like I even if you take the low end and say 48, let's just round it up to 50 just to make it easier to have the conversation. But let's just say out of those 3 studies, we say it's 50% of features that people are building are things that people rarely or never use. Now, I get it that there are some rarely used features that are essential, right? Like admin functions and things. You may not use those all the time, or it may not be a huge swath of users that uses that, but you have to have them. So set those aside because that's not 50% of what's being developed, right? And I think if that's true, if we even like go on the low end of that and say that it's closer to 50%, then that's an awful lot of productivity that's being lost. Not to mention just money and energy and effort of developers to build stuff that no one cares about. Those studies were all prior to AI. So let that sink in, right? If those are prior to AI and we were seeing at the low end 50%, across those surveys of things that no one was using, well, that's where I've been kind of forecasting this to say, if AI is speeding up our process to build things, the actual development of things, then what's going to become painfully obvious very quickly is that the bottleneck isn't developers. And my point from saying that in classes is to say it's never been. Right? It's not been developers that have been the bottleneck to us being more successful. That's where the focus has been, but I don't think that was correct. And I think that the correct area to put it on is the product side. And if that's true, right? I know I'm doing a lot of leaps here, but if that's true, if it is the product side, well, I think that what that really translates to is the discipline of product management, of being able to recognize what's valuable to your customers, to deliver that, to close the loop and verify that that's actually what was needed, and to measure the impact of those things, that discipline, I think, becomes just all the more essential, because that stat tells me there's a lot of bad product management going on. So that's my initial thought. That's a lot of thoughts, but that's my initial thought when you said that. What about you? What do you think about that?
That's right there. I'll share my thoughts, but I do want to harp on, or just go back to your first initial one of the callback to those studies there. When you first threw out those, because I've seen similar studies where it was about 50% was kind of it. I haven't seen those studies that say, like, what was the last one you threw out there on the high end, like 80 something percent?
Yeah. Actually, I remember. So I remember two of them. The 64% one was from a group called the Standish Group. There's been some question about their methodology in that one. I haven't seen the methodology of the 80% one, but it was a group called Pindo that did that one. And I don't remember the 48% one.
Sure.
That's just off the top of my head.
But that 80% one, though, that one sticks out to me because as you were going through it, I was like, okay, well, I have Google Docs open right here, just for some show notes or something. Just make sure I ask the questions that I'm supposed to ask, or I want to ask. And I thought, wow, I'm looking at the menu bar right here. I use maybe 2 or 3 of these consistently, and there's like 15 options up here. So yeah, I could absolutely see um, a large majority of features that a product has that go widely unused by the vast majority of its users. And I think that poses the question then is, do we want to go down the path of having one product be really good for, or like really good at one thing and then kind of okay at everything else? The thing that always comes to my mind in this, and I've been going down this rabbit hole of kind of digital minimalism, is like the cell phone, right? Where it's a really great communication device, okay camera, kind of okay video, kind of okay speaker if you want to use it once in a while. It's kind of okay at, browsing the web or doing some other things on there. Is it worth making those products that have an okay aspect to it on these other things that, some people like to use, but not everyone will use all the time type deal thing, which is a totally different discussion here. But that's kind of where my very meant of like, okay, that 80% plus isn't actually all that surprising to me. I would probably throw out there, for the vast majority of programs that I use, maybe aside from my banking apps, I probably only use 10 to 15%, maybe 20% of the total features in there. And it is such an interesting point to the productivity side of stuff of, okay, are we just being productive for the sake of being productive? Is it actually being productive? Are we just working for the sake of working? So yeah, just harping on that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I kind of have a similar response. And I think that there's, the good enough argument, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people take exception to that and say, well, why would we be okay with only doing something good enough? Well, it's not about quality, right? It's not saying that the quality of what you do is good enough, but it's saying that the amount of functionality is good enough. And I think your example of the cell phone is a great one because, I'm old enough that I remember before, that was the main way that people took pictures. When you had the little flip phones and stuff, the quality of those were not very good. And so you would have other digital cameras that took higher quality photos. But the reason that it won out and you started to just see more and more pictures taken from a phone, even though they were lower quality, was because you always had your phone with you. And so there's sort of an extent to which you would say, how badly do I want to carry around an extra device that's just for taking pictures? Even though it takes better quality pictures, is the quality that I'm getting with the phone good enough? And there was a tipping point there, right? There was a certain point where it won out, and the quality of what was on the phone was high enough that people said, yeah, I don't need a separate digital camera anymore. This is good enough for what I need. And that won. And I think that value curve is very similar across any product. There's a certain level that when you add features, it's a steep value curve. But after you've added those key core things, then it starts to tail off. It starts to flatten. And that flatten, it may still be going up, right? But the effort that it takes to deliver something is not the same return on that investment of effort, right? Early on, it's a huge, that effort creates a huge spike in value. Later on, that effort creates a small little spike in value. And at a certain point, that's where they talk about trimming the tail. Right? At a certain point, that's what they mean by it, is that value curve has gone past that point where now it's flattened, and we're incrementally adding small little things, but they're not valuable enough to justify the effort that it's taking to build them. Now, will AI change that? I don't know, right? Because if we have a bank of AI programmers, I don't know that it actually changes it, because we still could have that bank of AI programmers doing something else instead, you know?
Right. So it's figuring out that value proposition side of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The impact, the actual, how much do people care about this being there? And at a certain point, we had a podcast recently where we talked about this. Just at a certain point, there's an end of life. Right? At a certain point, you have to deliberately say no to something and say, you know what, this product has done all it's going to do, and we'll support people that still use it up to a certain point. But at a certain point, you say, no, it's better to have a new product now, where that value curve now starts to get, really big again. So yeah, I mean, from an AI standpoint, I think it does make an impact, because it kind of just makes it more apparent where that problem is. And that's why I think, I tell all the product owners that come through classes, I think product owners are poised to become highly impactful in their organizations in this AI era. Because if you can refine your craft to a level to where the things that you are producing are all a lot of value, right? All creating a lot of value, then now we have the productivity to spit out more and more of that stuff. If your side of it's, taken care of as well, then everything that we're producing is now producing a lot of value.
Right. I think it opens the door for programmers, developers. I'm not just going to say programmers, because I know AI can help out in every aspect of the development process. But I think it opens the door to developers not only just being more productive, but also just being able to experiment with new things more readily, more easily, right? And we can kind of simulate some of what our customers might want, right? If we can build a really great persona. I know you've done this in a class recently, Brian. I'm doing a similar thing, and just saying, look, let's build out this persona using an AI tool that we can use and create basically an AI agent, and say, here you go. This is my ideal customer. Here's my product. How can what pieces or new features of my products can I focus on in order to deliver higher value to this customer? Which is exactly what a product owner does. So I totally agree with you there, Brian, of saying, yeah, the role of the product owner is about to become one of the most valuable roles in an organization, in understanding how do we deliver value to our customers? What do our customers even want, right? Starting there. If you can build all the cool things you want, if your customers don't use it, who cares, right? So many examples of that, what I called out earlier, but so many examples of that, of like, if you build stuff just for the sake of building stuff, is it worth being built?
Right.
And I think that's more so the question that we're going to shift towards within our development cycles, of how do we know that this is worth being built, and what quick feedback loops can we start going down in order to get that?
Yeah, I used to always like to quote this. Everyone's always heard the phrase, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around, does it make a sound? And I always equate that to, software as well. If software is built and no one uses it, was it really built? And
yeah,
I know I've been on the bad end of that in the past, where I've worked on things with development teams that we've worked long and hard on something only to have the rug pulled out from underneath us, and for management to make decisions and say, no, we're not going to do that thing. And that's a horrible feeling. There's nothing worse. And no one out there wants to, I mean, go back to my stats, 50%. Nobody in software development would feel good about themselves if they said, hey, 50% of the stuff you've worked on, no one ever saw. Like that's not a warm, fuzzy feeling.
Yeah, could you imagine building a car and then building this awesome, incredible car, and then you're ready to roll it off the factory line, and then all of a sudden it gets cut in half, and that's what gets delivered, and that's what,
Right.
because that's all that people use.
Right. Or, you work overtime on the engine going from 0 to
Mhm.
60, and you find out that this is just going to sit in a garage. Like
Yeah,
it just doesn't make you feel good because that's not what it's been built to do.
right, right.
So yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. We have to focus on the discipline of knowing our customers, knowing what they want, and then, checking and asking them, did we actually deliver what you needed?
Mm. Mhm.
And it's funny, I was talking with someone this week about this, and it's amazing to me the number of times I've talked to people in the product area that will build things, but when you ask them, why did you decide to build that? You had a whole host of other things you could do, made you decide to do that instead of the other things. And I'm always shocked at the number of times I get blank stares or just no response at all because it's a great thing to do, right? Well, you're asking me, don't ask me. You should be able to say that, right? You should be able to back it up and say, yeah, here's the research behind it. Here's the market study. Here's the business case. We ran these tests and these tests showed this level of interest. You have to know what it is you're trying to do first.
Right.
And if you don't know what it is that it's intended to do with your customer, then how do you know whether you actually succeeded at it?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that comes out of that is like, how much of that data do you take, and how much time do you spend on gathering that data, right? I oh, I've heard a phrase recently, and it goes along the lines of like, be data informed but not necessarily data driven. Where we want to use data to inform our decisions, but we don't necessarily want to gather all the data in order for it to be 100%. We're not going to make a decision unless we have this data point to
Yeah.
guide our decision or drive our decision. Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's, we had, I think that the way to think about it is properly is bets, that you are making bets in different areas, and you don't make a bet. You don't wait to make a bet until you're 100% certain, because you're never 100% certain on a bet, right? There's always a percent chance that it could go one way or the other. But what you try to do is, make informed, or maybe that's not even the best analogy. Maybe it's more like an investment. You know,
Mm. Mhm.
when you make an investment in a stock, it's not just a pure bet because it's not a flip of the coin, right? If you do your research and you know enough about the company, then there are better investments than others. And I think that's the way we should look at our features and our products, is to say, this is an investment in our company, so I want to invest wisely. And you wouldn't be very smart. I'll put it this way: to have an investment strategy in the stock market of just, pointing your finger at something and say, hey, I'm going to spread out my investments over these 10 companies that are just random companies, because one of them is going to, hopefully turn out to be successful. You're not going to succeed, right? But if you research the 10 things that you're investing in, if you kind of know the history, know the trend line, know where the forecast is, all right, well, this one has a strong chance I'm investing here.
Right.
That's how you're successful. And we don't seem to always do that with our products.
Yeah. I've kind of tying that back into our products, and a conversation I had with a product manager. They weren't a product owner or a project manager, but a product manager, gosh, 3 months ago or something like that. Small company, very small company. Just, I knew the guy from school, and I was talking with him, and he goes, "Yeah, we feel like 2 week sprints is too long. We even feel like 1 week sprints are too long. We're trying to shoot for 1 day long sprints." And my question back to him was, okay, why? First of all, why would you want to do that? And he goes, well, because AI just allows our developers to be so much more productive and do more things. I'm like, okay, I could buy that. But My second question to him, which goes along the lines of what you were talking about here, because getting that feedback, getting that data, let's be data informed, not data driven, was how do you make decisions on how do you give feedback to your developers? How do you make those decisions on, yeah, this is the highest priority today versus yesterday? Is the market shifting that quickly that you have to make those decisions? And let's say it is. Let's imagine we live in that world right now. Some of you probably do, but I know someone out there probably does. But how do you do that? Like what tips would you give, Brian, to this guy about, yeah, let's drive the decision making forward and let's give the feedback faster if our development team is able to actually deliver, a fully featured feature. How do we
Yeah.
give them feedback on such a short timeline? Because I see teams all the time struggle with saying, yeah, we get good feedback every 2 weeks with our sprints. I've seen teams be like, yep, 2 weeks is no problem for us. We get good feedback. We're able to move forward. We're able to make decisions, be data informed and move forward that way. So we cut our sprints down into 1 week. I think 1 week is probably like in my mind, at least in my experience, is kind of that lower end, the lower echelon, I guess, of
Yeah.
the ability to provide meaningful feedback and meaningful delivery stuff.
Well, it's also about, can you create something that is of meaningful value in that time frame, right? Because our product increments should be valuable.
Yes.
And that's what's probably going to be the blocker for most teams going to like a day long sprint or so, is because, yeah, we can't produce something valuable enough in just a day. It takes
Right.
us multiple days.
Right.
In general, I mean, I would applaud it in general, because I think the shorter time span is generally better. I generally have more of a problem with people who want to go the other way and be too long, and do like a month long sprint. So I would much rather have a team that wants to do a day sprint than a month long sprint. But I mean, the questions I'd ask about a day long sprint is, can we produce something meaningful within the day? And maybe the answer is yes, right? Maybe across the team there's enough work, and maybe the work is small enough, right? That's really what it would take, is the breakdown of the work is small enough that they can actually get stuff out that's valuable within the course of that day. So are they able to produce value in a day? It might get to be feel a little ridiculous as far as the meetings are concerned, right? Because that's one of the considerations when you try to choose your length of your sprint, is how often can I have these meetings?
Right.
Take, for instance, just the sprint review, right? We need important stakeholders at the sprint review. Can you have important stakeholders every day? If not, if what you're doing is, no, that cadence is not wide enough that our stakeholders are too busy, they can't come every day. If that's the case, then you might want to consider a longer sprint. That doesn't mean you have to wait on delivery. And I think maybe that's something I'd ask them as well, is, are we confusing the sprint length with delivery length? Because you can deliver every day. You can deliver multiple times per hour. There's nothing that says in Scrum that it's tied in any way, shape, or form to your sprint length. And if that's the intention is to just release things more often, then absolutely, right? If your system is set up to do that, it doesn't matter if you have a week long or a month long sprint. If you can deliver things every day, it's a much better process, because back to your original point about feedback, can you get meaningful feedback? Well, if we're delivering it every day, we're going to get more meaningful feedback, because we're not only getting feedback from just the internal stakeholders, but we're getting it from external customers.
Right.
Let's just say if we have a week-long sprint and we're delivering every day, we have feedback from actual customers by the sprint review. That would be an incredible position to be in, to be able to say, yeah, we've released these 10 things this sprint, and here's what the customers are already saying about it. We got this feedback, or this one has generated this much support, so now we have tickets to kind of handle that. Yeah, it's in general a good thing. I'd want to make sure on those other areas to make sure that it's not being confused maybe with something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Just understanding the definition of what a sprint actually entails. Through that conversation, it turned out they were on we just want to deliver every day, and we have our sprint review at the end of the week and whatnot. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So you're not
So they're doing
having
week-long
day-long
sprints.
sprints. You're doing a week-long sprint. Yeah. Yeah. We laughed about that a little bit, but
Yeah. No, that's
yeah, I
great.
think
I mean,
that
I applaud them on that. That's a mature thing to do. And if your team can get to that stage, it's only because you've invested heavily in automation and DevOps and those kinds of things. It takes discipline to be able to do that. And I'm sure they were advocating it to you because they saw the benefit of what it provided them to release more frequently, which is an admirable thing.
yeah, 100%. They were like, "Man, this is awesome. I know you're in this space court. Like, let's talk about this." And yeah, it was a great conversation. It was a lot of fun. But they were just kind of confused with what it actually meant to hold a sprint. I think they
Yeah.
also heard the term Kanban for the first time not too long ago, and they're like, "Oh, that's the same thing, right? We're sprinting in Kanban just like we sprint in Scrum." And I'm like, "I no, a little different,
Yeah, not
slightly."
quite, not exactly the same.
Yeah,
Close cousins. Yeah. I mean, back to our original topic here. I mean, I think, as far as AI, we talked about that with product management. And as far as the Scrum world is concerned, I am very interested to see how this kind of upends the cart a little bit as far as our teams are concerned. I don't think that it's, at least from my own perspective, and I could be proven wrong, I don't see it as destroying the team. I don't see it as a complete reimagining of the process. I think the process still holds. The question is just, what does that team look like? Previously, we have a scrum master, a product owner, and then a set of developers. Well, I would imagine there's teams would probably have less developers because they can boost their own capacity by using AI co-pilots and other things to help them generate code faster. So maybe a team that previously was 8 people is now, a team of 4 or 5. And maybe that makes us reimagine a little bit about scrum masters and product owners and whether we need them to more frequently be across a couple of teams rather than just a single team.
with that, this question just popped in my mind, and you got into it a little bit there with like, hey, do we need our scrum masters or product owners to be across multiple teams? What would your ideal, let's say AI takes off, you're in charge of organizing 10 teams, right? And you have all the people that you need. So you can have as many product owners, as many scrum masters as you need. And we want to have our developer count be, 5 developers per team or 3 developers per team. Let's try to go down that path of saying we're small, right? We have AI. It allows us to accelerate the speed of our development per developer, right? So would you have one product owner per team and then have the scrum master float around, or would you have the same number of scrum masters as product owners?
It would greatly depend because just different scenarios might require different things. In general, then I'd probably match them up as much as possible because in general, I think there's kind of similar demands on both. They're different, but similar volume of demand. The interesting thing to me is the volume of work that can be created by a team of 8 developers or so right now. If that same volume of work can be generated because each developer now has the tools that their abilities are enhanced. Again, I don't see it as replacing, I see it as enhancing, right? If they can do that and they had 8, now they can do the same volume of work with 4. Well, it's not reducing the volume of work for the product owner,
Right.
right? Because the product owner still needs to manage a backlog and prioritize and stakeholders and customers, right? That's not going away. The work from the Scrum Master, I think, obviously changes a little bit because while it's one thing to try to manage team dynamics and get them to high performing levels when it's 8 people, it's a lot more individual focus when it's 4. So that's why I would say for a Scrum Master, maybe it does become more viable to be on a couple of teams because we're not contributing to the product in general. We're not building things, or maybe that's becomes the new mode as well, as the Scrum Master is more of a hybrid role with the combination of them and developer. I don't
Right.
know.
Right.
I think time is going to tell that over the next few years.
Right. Where my mind went with that was I would much rather have 2 teams of 4 than 1 team of 8. Well,
Yeah.
developers, right? 2 teams
Yeah.
of 4 developers that are as productive as my 1 team of 8 each individually, and instead of kinda cutting the headcount down, so to speak, or reducing headcount, I'd much rather reconfigure the way that my teams are organized right now in order to utilize AI, and I don't want AI to be replacing my developers. I want it to be helpful to them. I want it to augment their abilities and enhance their abilities, like you were saying. And in my mind, if I was running a company,
Yeah.
we all think we're in that armchair, right? We're all sitting in the armchair saying, if I could make all the decisions for a day, what would I do?
Yeah.
In my mind, I would say, okay, I don't view this as oh, I can replace my development teams. I can instead effectively, let's call it double. I get twice the productivity out of one developer with AI versus one without. I could double the amount of deliveries I get. I could double
Mm.
the features that I produce, that my teams produce. Or along those same lines, you could probably figure out a way to cut down the delivery timeline and cut it down in half, which goes back straight up to that top of the hour question that we were talking about of product management is the roadblock. It's the bottleneck there to decide how do we get this sooner? How do we get these feedback loops quicker? Right.
Yeah, and to
So
expand on that point, right? I mean, if you have two teams of four that, and that one team of four produces the same volume that previously a team of eight would do. Now I've got two teams, I'm doubling the volume that I can actually create. So to your point, there are some who would look at that as, well, I just lose four developers. And to them, here's what I'd say. Imagine this scenario. Two companies, right? And both these companies, they're competitors. These companies have the same exact situation happen to them. AI comes on the scene. AI enhances the productivity of their development teams. And one company says, hey, I can lose four developers and have the same level of productivity as I have today. So four people get pink slips, right? They maintain the same level of development that they have today. The second company says, hey, I can get twice as much done. So they start expanding the number of things they can produce. And since they're assuming their product discipline is in shape, they're
mhm,
producing things that people actually care about. Which of these two companies is going to win? It's going to be the second one, right? It's going to be the one that actually can now deliver more value to the customer. So I would not jump to that conclusion. And I don't think that's necessarily going to be a successful company that jumps to the conclusion that, hey, I'm just going to slash my budget for developers because now I can get the same volume with less people. Well,
right,
but your competitor is going to have double the volume with the same number of people. And why wouldn't you do that instead?
right. Totally. I totally agree with that. Part of me is really excited to see the studies that come out and say, here's the differences between these two companies in the similar space. One reduced their development and replaced with AI, and one enhanced their development teams with AI and didn't replace anyone with AI. And just super interested to see the difference in evaluations, in productivity, in releases, in whatever it is, right? And I'm gonna try to see if there's anything out there right now
Yeah. Well,
because
this is my call out to everyone listening too, right? Like if there's researchers out there, go research this and
yeah,
let us know. Or if you're in the middle of researching it, please let us know because I'd love to see that study as well.
yeah, very fascinating, right?
Yeah. Well,
Well,
this
awesome.
has been great, Court. I think this is a great topic, and we've gone a little bit past our time, but it's one of those deep topics we could talk about for a long time. And truth of the matter is, time will tell. Like this is just we're on that edge of the frontier where now we don't really, no one can say 100%. We have to see how things kind of play out and take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Brian. I think this was a great topic. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me today, and you got me a little more to that I'm thinking about now. So thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Court.
Thanks, Brian.